But one day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment.
And now, the moment you've all been waiting for. The newest show sensation streaming throughout the multiverse. Your hang place in cyberspace for paranormal news and views. Taboo Topics with Gene Broida.
Welcome everyone to Taboo Topics with Gene Broida. I'm your host, Gene Broida, also known as Lightworker 111, beaming to you from sea to shining sea across the Americas and the world. Every Sunday night between 7 and 9 p.m. Eastern Time in the United States and Canada on my Taboo Topics YouTube channel. Please go over there and subscribe, give it a like. Also at tabootopics.life/shows. And we are multicast on the awesome and incredible Global Enlightenment Radio Network at globalenlightenmentradionetwork.com. Panelists on each weekly Taboo Topics with Gene Broida read news articles about paranormal events, conspiracies, and other hush-hush subjects that we all probe further before moving on to the next taboo topic. And on today's show, today being April 26th, 2020, please welcome our panelists, Ginger Routh, paranormal community leader, promoter, researcher, and events coordinator, and Robert Solomon, my uncanny friend, on-air personality, and paranormal gadfly. Ginger Routh, please share with our international audience some highlights about yourself and your interests.
Thanks, Jean. I'm glad to be here. Glad to be back on the program. Great to see you both. I got into the paranormal when, in the 1990s, somebody tuned me into Flight 800, TWA Flight 800. And I started digging down that conspiracy path and just never got out. I've been to numerous groups, and I like the one-on-one in-person meetings where we can discuss and exchange ideas. And I've met some wild and wonderful people, including yourself, Jean, on this path. People who are into UFOs, who've had sightings and experiences, and ghost hunters, and I love it all. I haven't had my own experiences, but these are the people that I like to be around.
And tell us what you get up to, if you catch my drift. What keeps you occupied?
In terms of my real job?
Yeah.
I'm an artist. I'm a professional artist, and I manage a company that provides entertainment for events. So face painters, balloon twisters, fire breathers, airbrush tattoos, stilt walkers, magicians. So yeah.
I think it's incredible and awesome. And I really admire you as a facilitator of paranormalists. I've met so many people through you as president of the Coasties Club, and I thank you for that. I'm humbled.
Yeah.
But what inspired you to start a group like this. And by that, I mean a group fashioned, well, composed of people who listen to and follow the Coast to Coast radio program.
Fans of the Coast to Coast AM radio talk show program. You know, it's the kind of thing where in regular life, when you're out in the world with everybody else, you kind of have to hide that you're a listener of stuff like this. And I stumbled upon someone in my field that I was working with that said, hey, I listened to a radio program called Coast to Coast. You probably never heard of it. And I thought, heard of it? I live it every night. I am really, really into it. So finally I had someone else to talk to. And from there, it just spiraled into events and meetings and groups. And we found other people like us and just kind of collected groups here in the St. Louis area to share those ideas.
And
so, yeah,
that's what I like about you. Many, many people that we know, and I know many, many people we don't know who are listening right now or will listen at a future download, admired Art Bell enormously, mourn his loss to the paranormal world, admire all of the successors who's kept his original vision alive. George Norrie, certainly a huge influence on the field, and been at it so long, so dedicated, as many of us have been. But it takes work, hard work and unrelenting work to host a show of the caliber of Coast to Coast, in my humble opinion. It takes a lot of work, a lot of unseen sweat equity. And my hat is off to anyone and everyone involved in the production of Coast to Coast. And my hat is off to you, Ginger, as an organizer who cares enough about a taboo topic. Well, all the taboo topics covered on Coast to Coast, covered in the meetings of the Coasties. My hat's off, because right or wrong, agree or disagree, we are expressing ourselves. We are allowing our curiosity free rein without censure and without social condemnation. It's so refreshing in this day and age to have a real free and open forum. So I salute you.
Thank you.
Robert Solomon, I muted you because of ambient noise. So go ahead and unmute yourself, my friend. This is not your first time on the show. By the way, welcome back both of my guests who were on previous episodes of Taboo Topics with Jean Broida, and welcome to the show. It airs every Sunday, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time on my YouTube channel, Taboo Topics with Jean Broida. Please go subscribe and like and have a little bell alert you. And also simulcast on globalenlightenmentradionetwork.com. Please welcome back Robert Solomon. Robert, you and I have gotten to know each other a bit, I'm happy to say. Would you kindly talk a bit about yourself and what brings you back to Taboo Topics with Jean Broida?
First of all, I want to say thank you for having me back on again. I appreciate the love. I am always appreciative. Second, I want to say rest in peace to Art Bell. I was a big fan of Art Bell's back in the day. As I got a little bit older and started working different jobs and such, I wasn't able to listen to Coast because I had to get up so early in the morning to get to work. So I've recently been catching up on the different YouTube channels and things like that. And I've always been a fan of Art Bell's. Long time ago. I used to listen to him when I was around 18, 19, and loved it. And then he had one of my favorite guests, Richard C. Hoagland, who I'm a big fan of in the Mars and Monuments of Mars theory. I run a podcast titled This Uncanny Earth. It airs every Thursday from 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Standard Time on the Spreaker Network. Me and my co-host Spider talk about a range of things from Count Saint Germain and Immortals to the paranormal to ancient aliens. We run the gamut of all things paranormal, supernatural, and esoteric.
Word. And it's a great show.
Thank you.
It's an awesome show with great guests.
True. Like yourself.
Yeah. Well, after tonight, maybe you'll, well, I shouldn't say perhaps too much, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. After tonight, maybe you'll want to have Ginger on as well. Or maybe you've already set that up. What do I know?
She's always welcome to come on to talk about the missing 411. She seems
exactly
very
well, don't let the
passionate
cat
about
out of the bag. Don't let the cat out of the bag. We did our green room pre-show briefing, right? Our huddle. So let us let everything unfold as the lotus.
Yes.
And Robert, what else you want to, you know what intrigues me about you? You really are the man on Paranormal Street. You broadcast a lot through your phone video, live stream to various media. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, the one thing I pride myself on with this Uncanny Earth is I'm a fan of getting to know people. You know, I see so many paranormal researchers that want to close themselves off and they want to hoard all this knowledge and all this research, and it doesn't do us any good. And so I want people to see me as the person I am. Like I'm a real person that enjoys these topics. I'm not afraid to tell people that, hey, I listen to Coast to Coast, or hey, I have some theories about Mars and how we might have come from Mars. I'm not afraid to tell people that because they can ridicule all they want, but at the end of the day, I can look in the mirror and I'm proud of who I am. I enjoy what I do. I'm not worried about somebody else's nonsense. So when I do the live videos, it's a way to connect with our audience, with our viewers, to show them, hey, you know what? You're welcome here. Just come say hi. If you're too shy to say hello, that's fine. But I want people to see my face. So this way, when somebody says, hey, Robert Solomon, they can't say bad things about me because I don't put any air of I'm better than you. I don't think I'm superior. I don't think I'm an expert in anything. And I've been doing research on this sort of thing for a few decades now. But I'm not an expert. I'm not an expert in any of this.
Well,
I'm the novice just as much as you are.
Compared to some, you'd be an expert, and compared to others, you'd be a novice. Don't you think knowledge is a continuum?
True. But I think once you start, I think it's okay if somebody would call me an expert in something, but I'll never put expert in my title because to me, it's just, I love what I do and I don't want to have this big title of expert. If I can share ideas with other people, then maybe a light will blink in my head. And I'm like, I didn't think of that theory. Then I go research that theory and find there's connecting threads to these theories. So, I'm grateful that I've been given the opportunity to do this and meet folks like yourself and Ginger. And I'm just glad that we live in a time where we can do this. Back in the early 2000s and the 90s, podcasting was unheard of. To do the level of production that Coast to Coast would do, I mean, you had to have a license, you had to have the equipment. None of that was cheap. I knew people that recorded in bands and stuff, and their equipment was expensive to record on. Nowadays, all you need is a phone. You get a mobile phone and you can have your own podcast. So I'm just grateful.
Kids are doing incredible things with videos too. I mean, I have to agree with you there that thanks to technology, this is possible where it wouldn't have been before. But of course, technology is a double-edged sword. But before we go down that rabbit hole,
that's true.
Welcome, Ginger. Welcome, Robert. I am the host of Taboo Topics with Jean Broida. That would be me, Jean Broida. I too am a lifelong researcher of paranormal, specifically and mostly UFOs and human origin. Where do we come from? Why are we here? And the actual answer is quite detailed and nothing like what I was taught in school, as I suspected. And what's interesting is that lots of starseeds and light workers publishing now and speaking out now as social influencers, internet influencers. This is a whole new term for people apparently who have no other credential necessarily than making YouTube videos. And that in and of itself gives a credential of some kind. The number of videos and the number of subscribers you have determines how influential you are. Well, I suppose that correlates to book sales. Who am I to say? In any event, I have been irrepressible in my quest for knowledge, as so many of us since a very young age. Don't claim to have had abduction by a UFO, but am compelled to research the topic. And one thing I'll tell you, this is not a matter of belief. Do you believe in UFOs? No, no, no. This is a matter of my government and many world governments knowing for sure that the UFOs existed back before World War II, probably since time immemorial. It's looking like they engineer humans. I know if you're not used to this, it's probably blowing your mind and you're thinking, what quackery and nonsense. But there's a lot of justification for this. And a lot of people have researched this. But what's interesting is that we collectively, as individuals, have converged on the same conclusions because the evidence we find along the way is the same. The government documentation upon which we connect dots, by which we connect dots and upon which we draw conclusions is the same, no matter who we are as individuals. So to say, Robert, I'm not an expert, well, with every due respect, I have to say you are an expert compared to some people on lots of things. Other people are experts on things that you don't know or I don't know much about. I like to say that I'm certainly no expert on scrapbooking. You know, the insides and outsides of scrapbooking mystifies me. I have no idea. And frankly, not a big fan, not sure I care that much. Don't mean to disrespect anybody into it by any means. It's just not my bag, baby. But what is my bag is the decades-long psychological and sociological impact on the American people and the world on this decades-long cover-up by our government, who knows for sure UFOs exist and extraterrestrials exist and probably have treaties with them, certainly work alongside with them in science labs, been reverse engineering craft, and who knows what, have anti-grav energy and underground anti-magnetic trains that my dad knew about in the 1960s, okay? That would have been about 15 years after Roswell recovery. So 15 years later, aerospace defense contractors are very far along reverse engineering some of these technologies. So that's why today we've got craft in the sky, unidentified flying objects, which have a variety of other three-letter acronyms now, you know, UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon, all the same thing. Flying saucers, people, although they're not all saucer shaped. These have been known for a long time. And anybody who looks into it understands that there's plenty of documentation and it all says the same thing. It's the same documentation, okay? So as a researcher and reporter for the dailyconspiracy.com and other alternative media publications, and I hesitated when I said alternative because it has a lot of connotations that are rather negative now, just as conspiracy theorist does, thanks to the CIA, Central Intelligence Agency, which was created, my research shows, as the enforcement branch of the nascent, brand new National Security Council, which morphed into the National Security Agency. The NSC was created after World War II to deal with UFOs, the hardware. What are we going to do with this stuff? And they needed military presence. They needed goons and bouncers to keep people quiet after they witnessed stuff they shouldn't have done seen, and to confiscate their photographs and threaten them with mayhem, murder, mayhem, if they didn't cooperate, make them sign contracts that you will not divulge, and if you do, bad things happen. There's so much documentation that shows that this is real and not imagined. There's so many credible witnesses from all walks of life that I wrote a book, Unknown Objects, the top 10 US UFO cases. And after reading that book, you'll begin to understand, if you don't know full well already, why you must be crazy not to believe in UFOs. There's a preponderance of evidence right in front of us. And WikiLeaks just dumped everything they have. I wonder how many UFO files will be among them. That'll be coming out. So I'm an avid news hound. I research daily. I'm, as Laura Eisenhower and Patty Greer would say, I'm an info whore, meaning I have a lust, an uncontrollable desire for truth. And the truth is often not found in the mainstream. The opposite, mainstream seems to be used more and more for propaganda. And I'm certainly not going to rant here, but, well, I might. On Taboo Topics with Jean Broida, we go places. We go to dark corners where the mainstream doesn't like to go or is prohibited from going. And we shine our little lights of truth my neighborhood had Friday night lights last night. The much idled local fire protection district. They have very little to do. Now they're going to joyride through neighborhoods, flashing their lights. No sirens, thank goodness, but they're flashing their lights, and they want kids especially to gather on their front porches in their yards and shine their flashlights and wave sparklers and stuff. Here they're legal. So a lot of places you can't do sparklers. So don't do as I say, obey your local laws. But the idea being that kids and people fearful of what's going on in the world today can get out and show their support for the lockdown by flashing lights. And I'm thinking, am I cynical? Is this asinine? Is it all of the above? And again, I don't want to get off on a political rant, but when you start to look into UFO research and other conspiracies, you see this interconnectedness you would never have imagined possible. And then you run into master synthesists such as David Icke of England, Grant Cameron of Canada, Richard Dolan of the United States. And I don't mean that they're my favorites, although they are, but so many people have contributed so much. If you're not in that short list of 3 people, please, it's not because I'm slighting you, but many, many people are so authoritative and well-researched. And everyone here at this roundtable today attempts for that too. Our goal is authoritative research coupled with some editorialism. We have the rights to our opinions, but I always like to make people understand, here's my opinion as versus this is what I understand to be a fact, okay? So more and more and more of us are becoming awakened to this consciousness raising, and these are remarkable times. More and more of us are gathering and doing mastermind sessions where even remotely through Zoom conferencing and Skype conferencing and whatever other kind of conferencing through the power of the internet, and even without the power of the internet, just at this preordained time, we will raise our consciousness in a certain direction and go for a specific outcome. The more specific, the better. And people are raising consciousness and doing things that we only did back in the psychedelic 60s. And I'm thinking how much society now is turning back into that with public protests. I mean, again, this is not our purpose here in a paranormal forum, but when you start to look into cover-ups and conspiracy, and you start to look at what's happening today, it's inevitable that you will begin to connect more dots, and the seen and the unseen start to connect, and the physics and the metaphysics start to connect, and the seen and the unseen, it all starts to morph and connect. So I am so happy we have our international audience here Sunday, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern time zones on Taboo Topics with Jean Broida. And without further ado, may I please reintroduce Ginger Routh to bring our first taboo topic.
Thanks, Jean. You're going to like this because there's a little bit of cover-up and conspiracy here for you too in this story. I want to talk to both of you about David Paulides and get your take, his investigation. So I have a little blurb to read about him, if that's okay, and then we can talk about him. Hopefully people are familiar, but if not, this is going to give you the background. David Paulides is one of the most requested guests on paranormal radio and internet programs. He started appearing on such shows to discuss Bigfoot around 2007, but it wasn't until he started publishing extensive investigations on missing people that his popularity took off like wildfire. In 2012, he came on the air with host, journalist George Knapp on the program Coast to Coast AM to promote his Missing 411 book series. It was love at first listen for the audience, and they haven't stopped begging programmers to have him back since then, which Coast and dozens of other shows have done many times. Paulides is a former police detective who went into the Bigfoot hunting business after 20 years on the force. A deep dive into internet gossip gives different accounts on whether he left the San Jose Police Department on his own or was at odds with superiors. He calls it retired. He self-published a couple of books on the famous cryptid, one dedicated to the proving of the reality of Bigfoot, but that brought nowhere near the attention that his Missing 411 series of books got. Missing 411 volumes cover different regions of the United States, and in each one, he systematically documents mysterious disappearances of people in national parks and elsewhere. Paulides attributes unexplainable, unspecified causes to these disappearances. These are not your typical lost in the woods tragedies. If you've heard Paulides interviewed, you know right away why he's one of the rock stars in the supernatural field. He gives detailed, coherent accounts of some of the most bizarre and unexplainable disappearances that anyone's ever heard. He is thorough, he leaves no stone unturned, but that's not what sets him apart from other investigators of strange phenomenon. Paulides doesn't hint at or claim to know what's causing these occurrences. He's unbiased, unfazed by questions, open to ideas, and he doesn't go near cases with a reasonable explanation. If the answer could be random drowning, homicide, typical getting lost, he doesn't go near it. He brings to the table only the freakiest, creepiest stories you've ever heard in your life, and he sounds just like a cop telling them. Interviewers can never go wrong asking Paulides to tell the story of how he got into researching bizarre cases of missing people. He tells it the same way every time, and it's juicy. An avid outdoorsman, he describes visiting an unnamed national park where he was approached by someone who had worked in multiple national parks. That person found out that he was a former police officer and investigator and wanted to raise a red flag with someone outside the park system. The whistleblower told him that they felt not much was being done when a patron goes missing in the park, and not only that, there was no follow-up or help for the families. This led Paulides down the path of researching missing people in national parks and how it's handled internally. He does an amazing job of never disparaging the people who work in the parks, but instead blames administrations and policymakers. His introduction always involves the retelling of how he has asked formally in writing for lists of missing people at different parks and always gets the same answer. We don't keep a list of people who go missing in the park. It's an incredible hook because if you weren't listening before, you sure are now. He doesn't mention his previous work on Bigfoot sightings in the books or the books he's written. It's understandable on one hand, as it would muddy the waters of his current endeavors. He never says Bigfoot is taking people. He says he doesn't know what's going on, but it's definitely a cover-up, and it's definitely not something obvious. Even the most skeptical listener can roll with that. Paulides has multiple pet cases he can detail from memory in his interviews, although his books are packed with hundreds of cases that fit his specific criteria. Again, it's not just the stories themselves, but the concise way he tells them, full of absolutely eerie facts and details that makes listening to him so addictive. One such case is the June 1969 disappearance of 6-year-old Dennis Martin in the Great Smoky Mountains. On Father's Day weekend, the boy's family was on a camping trip and had stopped off at a popular resting point on the trail, a grassy mountain meadow known as Spence Field. Another family was relaxing there, and the children in the group started to play hide and seek together. As the adults sat on the grass chatting, Dennis, his brother, and the 2 other boys played a game until suddenly nobody could see Dennis, and he didn't respond to shouts of his name. Family, park rangers, and other hikers spread out to search for Dennis almost immediately, but he was nowhere to be found. That evening, there was a heavy rainfall, which is bad news for search and rescue, but they continued to search when they could, and the search for Dennis Martin became the largest in National Park Service history. Dennis seemed to have disappeared completely, leaving no trace at all. His disappearance is still a mystery. A boots-on-the-ground researcher, Paulides has visited many of the places he covers in his investigations. He also talks to people who were involved when he can do so without being obtrusive. He was able to speak with Dennis Martin's father, Bill Martin, who had shut out all journalists and questions over the years since his son went missing. When you hear Paulides detail this difficult conversation, all the hairs on the back of your neck will stand up and your spine will tingle. Paulides can rattle off dozens of cases like this, facts, specifics, firsthand knowledge. The Missing 411 series is up to 8 books now. Paulides and his son have also made a bunch of YouTube videos and 2 feature-length documentary films together. Missing 411, which came out in 2017, and Missing 411, The Hunted, which came out in 2019. In 2019, he was part of a History Channel series called Vanished, and it's only here that he seems to allow in an explanation as a possibility, although he doesn't say it's a solution or a fact. The show brings up the idea of portals that would take a living being into a different dimension. David Paulides continues to be one of the most favored speakers in the field and continues to produce books on the subject. Will he ever arrive at a final conclusion? Audiences will be there to cheer him on either way. And maybe that's the point. It's the journey that is meaningful and not the destination. So how does that grab you guys? You've heard David Paulides. I mean, he's a rock star. People love him. But does he want to?
I have heard him, and I've heard him in person, and you're right. He tells the very beginning of his story word for word, basically, which is kind of neat, actually, and it is a real grabber. And and he recounted some very incredible and grisly tales. One I can share briefly. And you know, he's getting all this information by buddying up to these park rangers who've been muzzled by their own organization and may not speak of this to anyone. Park Service says it doesn't keep records on missing people. What? Really? And families of missing people unhappy with Park Service performance and lack of accountability, that sort of thing. So this story has various levels, but just in terms of creepiness, that's where most people get hooked. Okay, so check this out. A lot of cases involve teenage hunting guys who go out in the woods with their guns and they go hunting. And in lots of places, this is a common activity, both for sport, but also to put food in the freezer. So whatever this guy's purpose, it was hunting, and we know his purpose was hunting, and he was used to hunting. He was not a newbie. He knew what to do. He knew what to take. He knew the woods where he was, and he had disappeared. So massive search, go find him. And what they found was not him. The way Paulides, is that how you say his name? How he said, what he said was the rangers said. One ranger went up over a dead tree. This would be a large diameter tree, a very big tree, okay, had fallen in the forest. One ranger opted to go up, climb on top of this thing and go over the top of it, while the other one went long way around the end of it, okay? So big tree, one climbs over, the other's going around, and the one on top is looking down, and he's looking straight down into a pair of boots, no socks, and then the pants, blue jeans, as if a person had been yanked out of them and the jeans had just fallen straight down. And parts of this guy's kit, his pack, and articles of clothing were found in other places. But what was notable about this case, and what's really creepy, is that on the site, which was a little clearing behind this fallen tree, what they found were all like thousands of bone fragments and splinters and bits of human organs. I mean, it was like this guy was shredded. Something had just shredded him. And what could do that? No animal could do that. So very creepy, very perplexing.
Yeah, it sounds like it sounds like you're talking about the 1975 Crater Lake disappearance of Charles McCullough, but you might not be, but it has a lot of similarities anyway. The pants were found in the same way. He had been a photographer and they found bits and pieces of his stuff around. Crater Lake is a real beautiful area, but it was snowy when he was lost. So
and then there was another case where a dude was, again, he was out hiking in the woods. They found his clothes folded and piled neatly on a rock in the middle of a river.
Okay,
dry,
so
and the boots weren't there, but his pack was there. Yeah. His pack was there, and everything from inside the pack had been taken out and stacked neatly. Is that right?
Well, I kind of want to discuss with you guys a little bit the investigator himself, David Paulides. And what you're talking about there is, it's kind of like Paulides maxed out the national forests. He did all that. Then he did a lot of hunting stuff. And then he moved on to what's called the smiley face killers, and that's what you're talking about. There's a whole phenomenon that I first heard it on Coast many years ago. It was broken out of Minneapolis about these disappearances of college-age young men near bodies of water. And it's often that the clothes are folded and the body is later found drowned like many months later, all kinds of weird details about these smiley face killers, but they get the nickname smiley face because there's a spray painted smiley face in the general vicinity of some of the bodies. And this has gone on like 20 years and there's still some, but it's kind of a northern Minnesota, North Dakota, Wisconsin, all that area. So David Paulides picked that up, and he doesn't call it smiley face killers, he calls it something else, but he kind of, it's akin to the kind of disappearances he goes after. So he started following up a bunch of those. But you can go way back to, you know, original researchers. It was originally broken by a journalist in Minnesota, a young woman, started doing stories on it, and it kind of took off about 10 or 15 years ago.
I was not aware there were categories of these disappearances, so thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Robert, what's your take on all this?
So one of my favorite cases of the missing 411 is one of the ones where the person was found actually alive. This was Stephen Kubacki in February 1978. Stephen goes missing in the Great Lakes Triangle region, which is, you know, Michigan and like that area. His skis, poles, they're found on a beach with footprints that lead to the ice where the lake was, and the footprints stop. Come May 5th, 1979, he's at his father's door, knocking on his door like, "Hey, what's going on, Dad? I'm here." And he tells his father that he woke up in Pittsfield. Sorry. Now Pittsfield's 40 miles away from his father's home, and he wakes up in this field wearing clothes that were not his own. I guess maps in his pocket that he had no idea where they were to. And this is all like 700 miles from Lake Michigan. Now, the theory that I have, it's kind of like a portal, but I look at more as a dimensional rift where the person just happens to be there mathematically, right place, right time. The electromagnetic forces are aligned to be perfect. They go through this rift, they come out. It's like, you know, where have I been? And the young man wasn't hurt. He wasn't taken, you know, he didn't have any marks, scars, bruises. He doesn't really talk much about, you know, he doesn't talk about the incident. David tried to get a hold of him. It's been a while, but he tried to get home and the guy didn't want nothing to do with it. Like, you know, he just, I don't know if he shrugged it off, like, you know, like this kind of thing happens all the time to me, so leave me alone. Or if he was just like, I just lost a large 15-month block of time. And no, I don't want to talk about it, because I think when you're a person that goes through something like this, your whole, and the guy goes on to be a professor, if I'm not mistaken, and your whole reality unravels right before your eyes. Everything you thought you believed, you start questioning, you start wondering, you start sitting up at night. You wonder, you know, you're watching or listening to things like Coast to Coast, or you're watching the latest documentary on History Channel or YouTube that has some paranormal significance, and you start saying, well, is that real? And then is that real? And is that real? And I think you either fall down the so-called rabbit hole and you just delve into it deep, or you put it out of your mind. You say, you know what, I'm alive. There was a freak accident and I don't ever want to talk about it again because it terrifies me. And I think that with Stephen, that was one of those. And if I'm not mistaken, that's one of the lesser known cases, because a lot of the cases like, Dennis Martin was brought up, and that's one of the big ones. That's one of the big cases.
It's kind of like his flagship case.
Yeah, that. And I'm trying to remember the kid's name, and I know you'll be able to help me on this.
Jared Atadero.
Jared
Atadero.
Yep.
Yeah.
And now there is another case. Now the Jared Atadero case, that hurt because I have a son.
Yeah.
Myself, and when you watch it, because I saw both the missing 411 and the hunted. I watched them both before we did our podcast on this very episode that I was telling you about. And what I noticed is the father was he was in shambles, you know, as opposed to the, and I am, what is the, because I have it pulled up. I didn't, this one I didn't mention because I believe the child was was actually
Dior Kuntz.
yeah, the parents killed that child.
The thing
without
is,
a shadow
like,
of a doubt.
yeah, I feel like, and I want to criticize David Paulides just a little bit here, and I know both of you can take it if I throw in a monkey wrench here.
Oh, please.
That case, so in one of the movies, he includes a case where, like, if you have any sense about you at all, it's obvious the parents did away with the kid.
Yes.
It's the case of Dior Kuntz, and it's, I want to say Idaho. Does that sound right?
It's either Idaho or Iowa. It was one of the two, but I think you're right on Idaho.
Missing on a camping trip.
Yeah.
And there were 4 adults on the camping trip, the young couple, a grandfather, and a friend. And nobody can produce a picture of the boy at the campsite. And nobody in the town near the campsite where they stopped to get food saw the boy. Nobody saw the boy at the campsite except the 4 adults, and there's no pictures. And parents in their 20s use their cell phone like it's an appendage. It's on them all the time. So as soon as, there's no pictures of the kid at the campsite, I was done.
Yeah.
So I was surprised that a researcher like David Paulides would, and there's been a few things like that over the years where I feel like I have to wonder, why is David Paulides keeping this up? I mean, right. He's doing really well. It's a business. It's a business, and it's a very successful business. He's a circuit speaker. His books are doing well. His movies are doing well. I love him. I love listening to him, but I did, spend some time digging into how he got into all this, because I feel like by leaving out the part that he's a Bigfoot guy, he's maybe not taking people for a ride, but
right,
promoting his work as you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, the one thing about the Dior Kuntz case that I was like, yeah, they killed the kid. Like they first of all, as a father myself, I don't have sex offenders around me. That's a cardinal sin in my book. There's no, like, I don't respect you as a human being.
Right.
And the grandfather's friend was a sex offender. Straight up, straight down, he was a sex offender. Now, you take your kid camping with the noted sex offender, like, no, they killed their child.
But Robert, keep in mind what kind of people these were.
Right.
These were the kind of people that have friends like that and have people with felonies and people with jail time. I mean, there's people like that. It's still believable that a family like that could lose a kid in the woods.
You're right.
But where's the proof the kid was ever in the woods?
Well, to me, it wasn't so much that it's not possible. It's the reaction of the parents as they're being interviewed.
Oh,
like if you look in somebody's eyes, they say the eyes are the window to the soul. If you look in their eyes, the eyes are dead. Like they don't, there's no remorse. Like with Jared, you could tell like that. I almost kind of teared up at the end because I felt for that man.
That guy's life is ruined.
It's over. He'll never know about raising that child. And that hurt my heart. But then you have these people and you're like, you're scumbags. And when I was watching there's 2 things that threw a wrench in David Paulides for me. That was the first. And the second is, I guess he's on this whole thing with the MK Davis Bigfoot massacre issue. I don't know if you've heard of this.
No.
And supposedly Bob Gimlin from the Gimlin video.
Patterson Gimlin video.
Years ago. Supposedly they killed and massacred a Bigfoot family. It was around that time period. And so this was a big thing, and MK Davis was pushing it. It died. I've never heard of this till about a week ago. And MK Davis comes back out again and says, oh, yeah. And you're going at a 70-year-old man, right? You don't have any verifiable proof except a YouTube video with the grainiest footage I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
And I guess Paulides like joined his wagon to this in some form or fashion. And I'm thinking to myself, David, you have the missing 411. Like, don't stick yourself to this other thing that's causing negativity. It's splitting apart a Bigfoot community. People are taking sides. And I love Bob Gimlin. I've met him personally. He's a good man. Like I said, he don't know me from Adam. And I went to a convention in Cambridge, Ohio, and he was there. And he was such a nice human being. He shook my hand. He welcomed me like I was family, and I've met a few people in the paranormal field, And he didn't have to be that nice to me. He could have been like, you buying the book, or you buying my this, that, and the third. But he just was like, he was the nicest person. And so I was like, why would you want to disparage? And I'm more leaning towards MK Davis on doing this. Why would you want to disparage a 70-year-old man to make your, like, do you need money, or do you want to be relevant again?
Okay, well, I'm going to cut in here right now. I hear what you're saying.
Oh,
but I think it's unfair to judge a researcher on a case or two that
True.
you may not agree with as appropriate for his forum, but it's his forum.
True.
And regarding both of those cases, I'm not very familiar with either of them, admittedly, but perhaps there were aspects to these cases that intrigued the investigator, Paulides, that we don't know about. In other words, maybe it was his spidey sense even. Maybe. He's not here to defend himself.
Right.
And I would love to have him here, not only to defend himself, but to promote himself. So please, let's make that happen. That's the visualization I'd like to have.
Despite the few,
apparently you're not happy with the way his boat is steering.
It's not so much that.
And as for the Bigfoot tie-in, I totally get where, as a former police officer, he might not want to hitch his wagon to that star, even though it is a genuine interest of his. I totally get separating 411 stories, missing people stories, which are apparently very popular. People are concerned, especially when kids go missing. Okay, people are concerned.
Absolutely.
Right.
When you say these parents killed their kids, and they knew a known sex offender, okay, that's circumstance. If I'm playing Judge Judy, that's circumstantial evidence. We don't know these people really. You say you know about them and what kind of people they are. Do you really? I mean, really? Were you? I mean, you sit around the table with them, chumming up with them. And again, I know nothing about this case particularly, but my nature as a skeptic is to give people the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
Until I have full and complete proof. And look at the you said 8 volumes of missing 411. I can allow a few cases to slip in that might be inappropriate, but I'm not going to dismiss all the research based on a few cases.
But you of all people know that sometimes in our field especially, there gets to be this hero worship. Like hero worship of these researchers that are just like the top.
I'm no advocate of hero worship. If you get into hero worship, that's foolish. Shame on you for being hero worship.
But you know it's big in our field. I mean, it happens. There's like just certain researchers that are just
in
like
any field. There are big name whoozy poozies.
Right.
Big name. You know, we see it all the time and around us. Like I said at the beginning of the show, we have this new phenomenon that's never existed in history before, where you can go online and be an influencer, an influencer with fans and followers and people quoting you and promoting your posts and talking about you and want you on talk shows. And, you know, we've never seen this before in history. So I get what you're saying. The man has built a brand and he has a marketing arm. He's got an agent, I'm sure. He's booking shows, and sometimes success can go to people's heads. I hope not. But once a person becomes alienating through their actions, then their fandom will respond in kind. If the quality of the content degrades to the point where it's now mere sensationalism without much crust or even crooks to it, you know, there's not much icing, there's not much cake, there isn't much there. You know, at that point, I think people always vote with their views, with their eyeballs, with their attention. But I never advocate maligning another person's character when they have served their communities, served research. And I think we should be able to agree to disagree respectively without calling people names and hauling in a bunch of dirty laundry. You know what I'm saying? None of us is perfect. Let's cut a little slack and let's let people defend themselves when we're out to tear down their good names and reputations. That's all I'm saying. Well, I'd love to have him on the show.
Nobody's out to tear down anything.
No. Good. Excellent.
We don't want phrases like that getting tossed around. That's
No,
not.
no, we don't.
Now,
No, we don't.
I will
Healthy
say that-
skepticism, total
Right.
approve, total nod to that. Yeah.
I believe
This
in
case, the other
questioning
case, I have my
authority.
doubts about it. That's fine.
I
But
believe
to
in
dismiss the
questioning
whole body
authority,
work, no, I
so-
don't do that.
Gene,
Yeah.
do you believe in your gut feeling? Do you believe in that gut feeling
I
you have?
absolutely do. And
That's-
when I ignore it, things go horribly wrong.
So like I said, when I was watching that part of that show, I got that gut feeling.
I get you.
When you read people's
get
facial
you.
features,
And I'm not saying
and
you're
right,
wrong.
it wouldn't
I'm
hold up in
saying
court, of
that
course.
as it's one instance.
Right,
Let us not
right.
generalize from one
Right.
instance.
And
or
the
even
thing
2 or
is-
3 or 4. When you look at the preponderance of the work,
and
eight volumes. My gosh, yeah,
And
there's
I'll-
going to
I'll-
be some ringers in there. Okay,
I'll
There's gotta be.
admit this on your show. I am biased because I'm a father, and I love my child 1,000,000%. So when I see cases like that, it gets to me. And really my issue is, like, I don't know why they didn't have the Dennis Martin case instead of that case.
Well, there you go. That's a
Because
better
the Dennis
question in
Martin
my view.
case should have
That's
been
a better question.
But
The
like I said-
editors, who selected that particular story when there are so many better ones, shall we say, or less. And I don't want to say provocative, because I think it's good for people to be provoked. But you
A little
had,
bit.
as a father, you had a visceral reaction in your guts.
Yes,
The
sure did.
editors, obviously, the editors wanted to punch you in the guts.
They did. They
okay?
got me
and
right
they
in the
got
stomach.
you. But
Right in the stomach.
right, so maybe it's the show that you want
That's
to
possible.
question. And I mean, I'm just saying, I'm playing devil's advocate here because
I expect you to.
That's how
I
I
expect
roll.
you to.
That's how I roll.
It wouldn't be
But,
your show if you
know,
didn't.
look how much we have to say about this topic that Ginger brought.
That's
Thank you.
great. Thank you.
And I know Ginger wanted to talk about the investigator and his caliber. Honestly, I can't speak much on that because I haven't done the deep dive into this. I'm fascinated
Have you heard
by
him, Jean?
He's a great presenter. He gives a very
You
polished
said you've
and
heard him in
thorough
person?
presentation. Yes, but I have not. That's basically, I was intrigued, and I was like, oh, on my vast list of things to do, let me check out this guy and what he's into more. And that really hasn't happened much. Although I wrote an article about him, actually.
He's kind of my
article
favorite.
called.
He is pretty his work is pretty good.
I wrote an article inspired
I
by
enjoy
you,
it.
Ginger, and based on his work, Strange Disappearances from National Parks. And I'm pretty sure it got published somewhere along the way.
Now,
It's
Ginger,
been a
do
while.
you have
And
all
you know,
8 books?
I don't. I only have the one that pertains to my neck of the woods.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I
But I
plan
could
to
look
get
up
them
the
all at
Missouri
some
ones
point.
and stuff. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I've been obsessed with him for a long time.
I like his research. Yeah, there's a few faux pas that I don't agree with necessarily, but as a whole, he's on to something. And whether it is because some of the cases, there was a child, I think it was Dennis Martin, where they said that they saw like another group of hikers were in another part of, it was like 6 miles away, I believe. And
yeah, that's
they
the
saw
case
the
that I
child.
covered in my
Yeah.
story. And that, and another thing that intrigued me was that Paulides.
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 I'm sorry, I'm messing it up.
Paulides went back to cases. Let's see, I think I just closed my file, but this case was from 1938.
Yeah.
You know, in other words, these are not all recent cases. And I frankly admire him as a researcher for not drawing conclusions.
Yeah,
Because he's an investigator. He's not.
He's a rock star. That's why
Right.
everyone admires him, because he doesn't say he knows the answer.
Yeah.
Exactly. I respect that as a researcher.
Gene, I think you're talking about Alfred Bale Haartz.
Yes.
That was the summer of 1938.
Yes.
Yeah, that's and it's so odd because all of these disappearances, because he has criteria that he would use to rule out.
So this kid disappeared,
things.
just in brief, and we're going to move on to your topic.
Oh, yeah, it's fine.
Pretty soon here, Robert. But here's another case where kid is in plain sight of parents and other kids and such, goes missing in an instant. I think there might have been shrieks or something at that before he went missing. But massive searching, bloodhounds who lost a trail up a mountainside. They lost a trail at a fork in the trail. They lay down to say, we're done. We got nothing more to do here. And the kid was found on a ledge. He was seen by hikers miles away on a ledge. It was called Eagle's Nest. And I researched this eagle's nest. What's that about? Very high altitude near the peak of this very high mountain. And basically inaccessible to even experienced hikers, very difficult for experienced hikers. Here's a toddler, basically, or a post-toddler, found not only linear miles away, but vertical, like 2 miles up vertically from where he had last been seen. This just doesn't make sense unless maybe he were kidnapped, but there were no signs. No, the trackers with the bloodhounds found no human trails, no footprints, no nothing, no torn clothing, nothing. The kid just vanished. He reappears on a ledge. Crazy stuff. That's what intrigues people. That's what makes a good ghost story is at the end of a good ghost story, there's the, with this kind of story, which is more like things that make you go, you're like, oh, I'm just puzzled. I want to know more. I want to read. I'm just fascinated. I can't. I think Ginger used the term addictive. These are addictive. Once you get into these strange cases of disappearance, you're like, oh, I'm totally hooked here.
Yep.
That's what intrigues me as a writer, and as a researcher, rather than. We want to know what the source of the information is. We want to know that it's a credible source, but at a certain level, a story is a story. And when somebody like Paulides says it's a true story, I'm going to tend to believe him because of his record in law enforcement and the fact that at least he came out at the very beginning of his career very sincere. Even if success has changed him, well, he earned that success. Let's not be small-minded. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt, in my view, and frankly applaud his success while holding him accountable for maybe the occasional lapse. But who doesn't have an occasional lapse? I asked you. So are we ready to head on into the next taboo topic and by the way, in case you just tuned in, thank you. You found Taboo Topics with Jean Broida, which airs every Sunday, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time on my YouTube channel, Taboo Topics with Jean Broida. Please head over there and give that a like, subscribe, be a founder, and click the little alarm bell for live stream broadcasts. Also simulcast on the awesome Global Enlightenment Radio Network.com. That's every Sunday, 7 to 9 p.m. And we have with us on this April 26th episode, Ginger Routh, who's just presented on missing 411 cases. Pardon me there. Paul, I'm sorry, name escapes me, Paulides. And now we have Robert Solomon of Uncanny Earth and Many Uncanny Adventures here with the next taboo topic. Take it away, my friend Robert.
Yes. So what I want to talk about is I have been, as I was talking before we started here, I've been researching the skinwalker or the sort of anthropomorphic human being. And I came across an article today. I've been doing some real heavy research on skinwalkers and Native American folklore, but I found something that kind of fascinated me, that pulled me into this sort of idea that maybe we all were connected at one point. I don't know how we would have been connected. Boats. Some people believe in, that ships and things like that, depending on how you view ancient history. The technology was greater, in my opinion, my beliefs that the technology was a lot greater than what people will tell you it was back way back when. So I think that people had a better connection in terms of, you hear about Phoenician coins being found here in the United States and Chinese coins being found in the United States and all these things that make you scratch your head and say, how did those get there? So I found an article on archaeology.org about a tablet that has a Native American or a native from any other country of ancient history drawing that a lot of these drawings seem to share in caves all across the world, not just here in the United States, in places like Utah and Arizona, but apparently in Haifa, Israel. According to a Haartz report, researchers Danny Rosenberg, Georgi Lengyel, Danny Nadal, and Rivka Chassan of the University of Haifa have found an engraving on a Natufian burial slab discovered in northern Israel's Rakfet cave. The researchers suggest the image resembles a dancing shaman, or perhaps a person dressed as an animal, or even a lizard, and that Natufian burial rites may have been more complex than previously thought. The stone, which was carried up a cliff and into the cave, was found covering the remains of several people who died between 14,000 and 12,000 years ago. In all, some 30 burials and 10 slabs of rock have been found in the cave. Rosenberg said the other stones may have been painted or decorated in a way that has not survived. Previous studies of Natufian burials from Rekfet Cave have uncovered evidence that the graves were lined with plants. Grave goods such as meat, stone tools, and mortars have also been recovered, in addition to artifacts related to the brewing of alcoholic beverages. Nadal and Rosenberg noted the large mortars may have been used as drums, and then it talks about, if you want to know more about Natufians, then you can go to another article. What struck me as interesting about this is this seems to be a universal pattern. It's not just something that is in the United States. It's not just something that was in Europe. It's not just something that's in Asian countries. These drawings are found, or these images and these different aspects of man dealing with animals or having a kinship with animals seem to be something that is shared universally between cultures. And it strikes me as odd too, because they always have like a person wearing a pelt, wearing animal garments of some form. And of course, people, know that a lot of that was to keep warm and things like that. But it was also for rituals and traditions and different folklore where different groups of people would worship, say, a dragon, or they would worship an animal of some form, or have some form of respect for an animal. So what really pulled me in with this article is the fact that they're finding these things buried all the way in Israel. And if we go back in time in the whole Middle East areas, you have, like Mesopotamia, you have these big civilizations, but then you have this. And so it just fascinates me to no end our history, because like you said at the beginning of the show, our history isn't what they tell you in the school. I've never believed that. Even in school, I didn't believe that. But to see how we are so similar, I thoroughly believe that we have had contact with each other for a very, very long time. I don't think that all of a sudden, boom, we had contact. Like, I think that the Vikings were sailing over here, and they were meeting with the Native Americans that lived here on this continent at the time. I just think there's a lot to this that people don't want to let out of there, and that's just what I think.
I think I agree completely, Robert. Certainly the evidence is irrefutable. Mm-hmm. And we find ancient Roman coins around the world, ancient Phoenician coins around the world, and other trade objects that we can trace to specific cultures. And I think what's going on is that certain people in any society are born traders. I consider myself a born trader. I would go to rainbow gatherings, the gatherings of the tribes, where basically when you enter this gathering of thousands of people held on federal land it's basically both to pray for world peace at the 4th of July, but also to exercise our right as Americans to freely assemble on federal land without a permit, okay? So when you enter a rainbow gathering, the idea is that you donate everything that you have of value at the entrance. So you empty your pockets basically, and you enter. And while you're there, it's communism basically. You are fed, and you may get medical treatment at the MASH tent, and you just don't have to worry about the economy in the sense that presumably you brought some shelter, but if you didn't, there are communal yurts and tents where people can bed down together, like shelters, if that's what you want to do. But most people take care of themselves, and they have their little mini camps and little mini communities, or they rough it out in the woods by themselves. And you basically put something in, take something out, and in that environment, a free trade community sprang up, and there were trading circles. There was a trading center. And you talk about addicted, I became addicted to trading. So never underestimate the human drive to get the juju, to get the goodies, and to get the goodies that nobody else has, which become more valuable because they're scarce. So it doesn't surprise me at all that we find artifacts around the world that show evidence that certain people, not necessarily big groups of people, but maybe just a few people, took it upon themselves to say, I'm going to boldly go where nobody's gone before. And there they went, and they left traces of their passage. Doesn't surprise me a bit. What do you think, Ginger?
Well, I wanted to ask Robert, so what was found was you're talking about like artwork, and I did a quick little search on the internet to see if I could find it. Did you get to see a picture of it?
Yeah, so if you go to it was taken from the Haartz, HAARETZ.com site. And it goes into a little bit like, this is like a good, probably 5-6 page article. I read through it earlier just to kind of get a little bit of more information. And the way it looks, they show one of the figures, and it looks like, it's got like the human sort of, as well as a person could draw. It looks like something I would draw, because I'm not an artist at all. And this looks like me, like they took my design that I drew. And so it looks almost, it does look human, but I can't explain it. I can link the article on anywhere that anybody wants to read it. I can link it. It's not a big deal, but they find mortars, they found all sorts of different objects. And like I said, it fascinates me to no end how similar we are when we all think we're different. And there's many instances of that, this being one of those instances, in my opinion.
So it doesn't necessarily even mean that the same group traveled. It could mean that we as human beings are almost kind of like racial memory, or born with certain ideas or symbols. Or
I like to think that many of us unknowingly can tap into the universal consciousness. Nikola Tesla was very good at tapping into the universal consciousness. That's where he said he got a lot of his ideas from, and he was a great man. I think we all have that ability, and then as we get older, we sort of shrug it off, and we, because there's so many, why is it that every civilization that is ancient, I'm not talking like our society now, they all have some form of animal-like deity. With the Chinese, it was dragons. You have dragons in Central and South America with Quetzalcoatl and things like that. There were dragon-esque style creatures.
We have the Piesa bird here in Missouri. Do you know about that?
Yeah, you actually, the Terror in the Skies documentary by Seth Breedlove, they touch on those things, like the Thunderbirds, if you will, these big gigantic birds. And I don't know if it was there, but they had a big rock wall, like it was a huge rock wall, and they had painted this bird on the side of the wall. Then it ended up getting damaged and over time. But it's very odd that all of these places have similar cryptid style creatures. Like you said, the Thunderbirds. It wasn't just there that they saw these things. They saw these things down in South America, down in Central America, and then we talk about dragons in China. We talk about all these different flying cryptid creatures that people share a kinship with, so I mean, it's not too crazy to think that these large birds could cover such a vast distance in a shorter time than most of us would think, but it just strikes me as odd, because you even have pyramid style buildings from one place over here, and then on the other side of our planet you have similar pyramid like structures. And when I say similar,
pyramids on every continent now.
Yes,
pyramids have been found on every continent, including Antarctica now, Antarctica.
Yeah, and the thing is, people don't understand, in some of these places there are pyramids, but they're underground. because
Yes.
it wasn't
Or
habitable to
they've
build it
been
above ground.
grown over and they are
Yes.
forested now.
Yes.
Wasn't that Bavaria? Is that the
Yeah,
place?
there's one there, and then there's parts of China where they won't let people film like aerial views, and they covered it over with a forest because there's pyramids there. Because, like you said, there's pyramids on every continent in the world. And
So
maybe
that's
even other
physical
places.
evidence, but when you get into lore
Mhm.
and history,
Yes.
I was taught these are myths. This is lore,
Right.
but I've always regarded historical documentation as pretty dang factual because it takes a lot of work to document stuff, and
Right,
not
right.
everybody got to read and write. Okay, now
Right.
history is written by the winners. We
Of
understand that.
course.
But
Yep.
when you hear the same concepts, and this gets back to my interest in human origin, when you hear the same concepts being parlayed basically everywhere on Earth, a lot of talk about sky fathers and earth mothers everywhere you go. The idea being that progenitors came from the heavens, came from space, outer space, came here, interbred with humans or bioengineered humans, getting into Sumerian myth, topic for another day. But in any event, when you have aliens intervening, there is no stretch of the imagination to think that there will be common themes to human origin as expressed through history, even if you call it a myth. Okay, it's what people documented and observed and believed, even to today. So-called primitive cultures, the third world, fourth world cultures. I'm talking about Australian Aborigines and unfortunately Native American Indians. What a noble, these are all noble people, noble first people on earth, and yet they're put last. It makes no sense at all.
Well, it's
These
just
people
like,
all agree as to what went down, and mainstream science is like, that's not what went down. That isn't what went down. We know what went
And
down.
it's not
And we're going to
just
make the
mainstream.
evidence fit what we know went down. And then when the evidence doesn't fit what their mainstream narrative is, we're the crazy
it's
ones. And that's what I
important to remember too, this is spiritual, not just science. And mainstream spirituality doesn't want to allow this in. This
No.
threatens the Christian status quo a little bit.
But to be
Jean, you're
honest,
muted. Jean, you muted yourself.
oh, she muted. To be honest,
I
though,
got so excited. I muted myself.
but to be honest, I, as a Christian man myself, these don't bother me. None of these topics bother me because I believe these things could have happened. I mean, we look at different, if we sit and we study the Old Testament, we study different aspects of the mathematical parts of it, which are some of my favorite, and the way the ark was built and the way things are built, it's not impossible. And I think instead of us always fighting in a religious aspect, I think there's a lot of commonalities. One thing that I found really fascinating, and I this is just a hypothesis that I was kicking around the old noggin one day. If either of you have ever read the book of Enoch, and it talks about the fallen angels, well, the fallen angels get imprisoned, fallen watchers, they get imprisoned. And if you've ever read Dante's Inferno, part of the Divine Comedy, which I love Dante's Inferno, not a fan of Purgatorio, and Paradiso is pretty good. There's a part in Purgatory in Inferno where they talk about where the worst of the worst go. And they go to a lake of ice. And if you are a traitor, that's where you go. Most of the traitors are there except Judas, Brutus, and Cassius, who were all Brutus and Cassius were the traitors of Julius Caesar, because Caesar was like, that was close to Dante's, that area, Italy, Rome. And if you go to Antarctica, it's the coldest place, one of the coldest places on the planet. So I thought to myself, what if they imprisoned these fallen angels in Antarctica, or they imprisoned them, then covered it with ice, and that's why they're finding these pyramids. Now, obviously, I don't go too public with that because I'm sure somebody would call me a crazy, but it's just theories and thoughts that I have, and I was just happened to be looking over at the Inferno when I was thinking about this, and I go, the ninth circle is cold. It's because when you turn your back on a friend or you stab somebody in the back, it's cold-hearted. You're cold-hearted. So it was thought to be the same thing, that it's such a cold place because the hearts of the men that did these traitorous acts were the coldest of the cold. So put them in a place that is the coldest. You know, a lot of people want to attribute it hell to being the hellfire, but in the Inferno, it's the complete opposite. It's actually the coldest place for the coldest hearts of man.
So to get back to animals, and what you were talking about originally, we know that animals are very important to human beings, always have been. We still have many animal lovers on Earth, and also people who understand that certain animals deserve respect. But what's interesting in ancient records of all kinds is how many chimeric creatures there are, by which I mean hybrids.
Oh, I love those.
So-called mythical creatures. So griffins, I guess Thunderbird might be one, but we have Sumerian accounts and some Egyptian accounts that ancient aliens, ancient astronauts, were not only busy hybridizing humans to slay for gold, but playing around with other types of hybrids, human-animal and animal-animal hybrids, and came up with all manner of things. Some were deemed successful experiments, some not so much. But we have lots of art that reflects these early attempts, apparently, at biological engineering. And then we get a transition into spirit animals, and I'm thinking of the totem poles of Northwestern American natives, totemic art, and the idea of having a spirit guide that is an animal. Okay, so my spirit guide is a fox or a wolf or a fish or a this or that or the other. And it's intriguing because modern religions tend to discount that aspect of spiritism, that animals have spirits, animals have consciousness. You can communicate maybe telepathically or psychically with animals. Animal lovers know what I'm talking about. It's a real deal, okay? So it's no surprise that we find evidence that people were preoccupied with animals. What if an animal were your best friend? You lived in the bush somewhere and maybe you'd been banished. Maybe you're just a loner. Maybe your occupation is sheep herder and you spend a lot of time alone. If you're a sheep herder, your dog is going to be your best friend probably, you know, even if you come from a large family. So I get all of this. And it doesn't surprise me to see this kind of trace left. But what's intriguing is when it is found in places you wouldn't expect it around the world. And of course, the mainstream says, oh, we have to discount that because we didn't account for it. Whereas the actual open-minded skeptical researcher will say, I guess we need to broaden our understanding because this new information doesn't fit what we knew before. And the mainstream has a very hard time accommodating that sort of, well, we weren't exactly right, were we? Mainstream isn't very fond of admitting that it has been wrong and expanding a paradigm, maybe doing away with one paradigm and doing a shift into a new one where, everything we knew really was wrong.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you bring up the hybridization. The first thing I thought of was the Minotaur of Crete, you know, like, and so I have to wonder if there was the case where they did that, what were they hiding? What was in that maze that needed to be hidden so well that they put a half man, half bull creature to guard?
Wasn't it the Golden Fleece?
But what was the Golden Fleece?
A golden fleece? That's the question.
But what was it? Because if you notice, a lot of time with a lot of relics, they're named something to confuse the person, and they'll relate to something else. So, what was this gold? Was it, a lot of times?
Well, fleece could be a mistranslation.
True.
One thing. You know, a fleece literally is what you shear off of a sheep.
Yes.
Right? Is it hair? It's wool. It's
wool.
It's a fiber. It's a fiber.
There we go.
You shear a fiber, that's the fleece,
Right.
Well, I'm a big believer in mistranslation, lost in translation from original language through ancient Greek and Aramaic and Babylonian and Sumerian and then ancient Greek and ancient Roman and all this other stuff.
Akkadian,
by the time we get to it in modern English, how many translations has this text gone through, for heaven's sakes? And when you're looking at a translation, this is somebody's interpretation of a source text. And in many cases, a single glyph or word can have multiple meanings. This is true today in Asian languages.
Yes.
And in English, the same word spelled can have different meanings, or the same word heard can have different meanings. Okay. So we have phonemes, we have, language is a mess. Language is a mess. So you're right. When we talk about a golden fleece, what was it really? Was it a magical cape?
Or was it somebody that just was a smart aleck? See, that's what we don't think. It could have been somebody that was just like, what do we call this thing? Let's call it a fleece. We'll throw everybody off that's in that might be in the future, that might want to research this. We'll call it a fleece. They don't know what we're talking about.
What about UFO abductees and remains, where witnesses say, witnesses come across a UFO crash before everything's spirited away by the military. Right. And they observe dead bodies. And they say this being was clothed, but it was close fitting, and I saw no seams, no buttons, no zippers, no Velcro, no obvious closure. And it looked like whatever this covering was tight fitting all over their body. It was as if they had grown this garment.
Or if it was vacuum sealed.
Golden fleece, I mean, we can play what if all day long.
We could do
what if golden fleece was some sort of alien vestment, alien clothing?
Very possible.
Which had what we would call supernatural powers. And again, I'm no student of the ancient Greek. I don't know what attributes this golden fleece was supposed to have, but it had attributes, because they all did. All these relics had attributes. And for an Argonaut to spend so much time and energy, and for such tales to have been told and preserved about the quest for the golden fleece.
Good old Jason. Yeah. And the funny thing is, we might just be blowing it up bigger than it is. It might not even be all that. It might be something simple. It might just be a literal piece of golden fleece that somebody had to have it. It was the height of fashion, and somebody's like, I want that golden fleece to wear. That's the thing about humanity. It could be any of those things.
What about the goose, the fabled goose that lays the golden egg?
Yeah.
And what's interesting to me is that these stories, these fairy tales, are invariably linked with giants. Okay, so here's another dot that's connected. The giants lived in golden palaces.
Yep. In the clouds. In the clouds.
And they ate off golden plates with gold and silver. Well, goldenware. It wouldn't be silverware, would it? It would be goldenware. They captured beautiful human women and kept them in, guess what? Golden cages that had golden keys. And the hero, Jack, invariably Jack, would climb up the beanstalk sprouted from a magical bean that he got through extremely strange and synchronistic circumstances.
Trading his cows for some beans.
Right? Trade cows, get beans. Family laughs at him. Why did you make such a crazy deal? Right. There's no such thing as magic. There's your mainstream. No such thing as magic. He says, I don't believe you. I'm a believer. And he plants the bean. It grows up. He climbs up. It's death-defying. He gets up there. He rescues the maiden, who's probably a princess.
Right.
Because aren't they all?
All of them.
And the giant is sleeping. The wife of the giant is sleeping, tiptoes along. I mean, this is such drama, such pathos, right?
Yeah.
And it always ends up that the giant wakes up as he's making off with not only the princess, but some golden stuff, because
the goose or the egg or whatever.
The goose, the egg, the key, the cage, the something. Hightail it back down the beanpole, and then at the bottom, whacking it down. So the giant can't come down and kill them all, because we know from even the Bible that giants love to kill people and eat them. And to the point where they would destroy entire communities.
Yes. And they had to be destroyed because of it.
Which is why we have so many stories about how horrible giants are.
Yeah.
Nobody says good things about giants. Nobody.
I've never read one good giant report, because you have Cyclops, who were supposedly giants. They were bad. They were throwing rocks at chips. And then you have them everywhere. You have them even in Native American folklore. You have giants too, and they were bad. So it's like, what's with people being really tall? Why are they so bad?
They apparently had voracious appetites.
That's it.
And what I read was that first, by the way, these giants were the children of these so-called fallen angels, who I believe were cosmonauts, Anunnaki space, members of a spaceship called Heaven, if you will, and that they mutinied and they were cast off the ship with no communication and no artificial environment. So now they would be subject to the length of days on Earth, subject to human aging. Okay, terrible, terrible for them. I mean, they hated it. And they went through Enoch. Enoch was actually the Jehovah's appointed human representative. This is a great, if you haven't read the book of Enoch, run, don't walk, and get the book of Enoch or listen to the audio book. This is, and it's a little heavy, but it's worthy really stuff. It's worthy. Enoch, as the messenger of the fallen angels and intermediary with Jehovah back on spaceship Heaven, is relaying all their communications because they're so reviled now. Their mutiny is so heinous. And basically their mutiny is about giving human beings the knowledge of their own origin. Can't have that when you're in a controlling leadership society, which is what was going on the spaceship. Our procreators didn't want us to know where we came from. That was the knowledge of good and evil, as written in that story. So, I mean, this is all, again, Robert gave his views, I'm giving mine. When you layer these stories with these filters, it all starts to make perfect sense. It really does.
And if you haven't read it, I have, the one thing I have multiple copies of are like religious texts, because I find them to be fascinating. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, a book I have upstairs about the Dead Sea Scrolls, there's a small book inside. It's called the Book of the Giants. And in the Book of the Giants, one of the giants named Gilgamesh, see, we have Gilgamesh, we have Sumerian, we're bringing it full circle, is pleading with Enoch to talk to God to not end them because of their rebellious ways. And so the whole book is just talking about, I think it's a page and a half max. It's not very big, and a lot of it, because I didn't find it all intact, is some of it's guesswork with, like, there might be an R or an is on the inside. But the Book of the Giants, it kind of adds on. Good stuff.
Final thoughts about Robert's topic here?
I think it's a great topic, and I could listen to Robert all day. This is interesting stuff.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
It is. It's great. I'm so glad you brought that.
I love that you guys brought it into the religious texts, era. And
for viewers who have just found us, welcome. You have found Taboo Topics with Jean Broida with my illustrious guests, Ginger Routh and Robert Solomon. We are slaying these taboo topics as we do every Sunday night, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern in the United States and Canada on my YouTube channel, which I hope you'll subscribe and get alerts and like and love and adore. It's Taboo Topics with Jean Broida, also available at the Global Enlightenment Radio Network.com, live streaming 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern, and in the video archive, the show archive section as well. So, third and final panelist is yours truly, and I am going to share with you an article that I wrote for the dailyconspiracy.com, published April 20th this year, very recently. This is the April 26th episode of Taboo Topics with Jean Broida. As Lightworker 111, I write for several alternative online publications to bring you news that the mainstream never will. And this one is titled, Remember That Time We Bombed the Moon? So here we go. Hang out with UFO researchers long enough, and you'll probably hear the one about the time the US Space Agency bombed or nuked the moon. Some ufologists and other scientific types think abusing the moon with excessive force is nothing short of insane, not to mention poor use of taxpayer money. Is there any truth behind this story? What, if anything, has the United States government authorized the military and space experts to do to our only natural satellite, Mother Moon, and why? Gather round and I'll tell you the official story. On January 6, 1998, the U.S. National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, launched Lunar Prospector as one of its Discovery Program missions. Built to investigate the low polar orbit of the moon, onboard equipment mapped the surface composition, located lunar resources, measured magnetic and gravity fields, and studied outgassing events. Lunar Prospector carried only scientific instruments. Its data complemented the image data from the Clementine mission, which carried mostly cameras. The stated purpose of these projects was to educate NASA researchers about the origin, evolution, and current state of the moon. In 1999, Lunar Prospector detected concentrated hydrogen signatures, that's large amounts of hydrogen to you and me, in permanently shadowed craters at the lunar poles. The NASA scientists got very excited because one atom of hydrogen combined with 2 atoms of oxygen makes a water molecule, the basis of life as we humans know it. The lunar explorers wondered if the moon's polar hydrogen might occur in the form of water molecules, H2O. In April 2006, NASA selected the Lunar Crater Observation and Sensing Satellite, abbreviated LCROSS, to help find the answer. NASA's Ames Research Center in California had designed an ingenious satellite composed of 2 parts: a projectile that slammed into a crater, kicking up a giant debris plume, and a spacecraft that flew through the spaceborne particles of moon rock and dust to determine its composition. The moon has very little tilt on its north-south axis, so the sun never shines on the bottom of some polar craters. Water ice dating back billions of years there might have escaped instant evaporation from direct exposure to the high temperatures of sunlight, so the scientists thought. The LCROSS projectile was the section of the rocket that had lifted LCROSS off the Earth and into space. Basically, an empty fuel tank that measured just over 40 feet long, and rather than toss it out with the other space trash, I wrote an article about trash in space, NASA released the used up rocket, hurtling it almost straight down into Cabeus crater near the moon's south pole. The date was October 9th, 2009. The LCROSS spacecraft had 4 minutes to collect information before flying completely through the debris field before it too, the LCROSS spacecraft, crashed down into a shadowy lunar crater, adding to the debris plume. For Clementine to photograph. Quote, as the debris cloud rose above the crater's rim and was exposed to sunlight, any water, ice, and other molecules of interest were vaporized and broken down into their basic components. The cameras and other instruments on board LCROSS could then see what this lunar crater soil was made of, unquote. So NASA timed the experiment with its Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, LRO, which had just thrown past the impact site when it occurred. So this mission combined the LCROSS projectile, the Lunar Prospector, okay, with its instruments, and timed it to coordinate with the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, LRO, which had just flown past, okay? So LRO continued studying the scene unfolding below after the LCROSS system committed hara-kiri in the name of science. What did NASA find on the moon after dropping the equivalent of a 2-ton kinetic missile on it? Hydrogen gas, ammonia, and methane, all potential fuel components for space missions, large amounts of light metals such as sodium, mercury, and silver, and lo and behold, crystals of water ice. This wasn't the first time scientists considered bombing the moon. In 2000, Leonard Riefel, a former executive at NASA, disclosed that in 1958, he led a project named A Study of Lunar Research Flights. Project A119 included a youthful Carl Sagan who worked on a team predicting the effects of a nuclear explosion in a vacuum and low gravity condition, as well as evaluating the scientific merit of the project. So our young Sagan got to work right there. And this project A119 had been concocted by the United States Air Force. It was a top secret plan to detonate a nuclear device on the moon, this back in 1958. Why, you may well ask, would anyone want to detonate a nuclear device on the moon? Here's why. The military top brass wanted answers about astronomy and astrogeology, which is the study of space-based minerals. But they also wanted, back in 1958, to boost American Cold War morale. We were losing to our arch enemy, the Ruskies. The Soviet Union stunned the world on October 4th, 1957, with the successful launch of Sputnik 1, the world's first artificial satellite capable of maintaining low Earth orbit. So the nuke-happy U.S. Air Force generals figured that if the American people could see a faint explosion on the face of the moon, they would be reassured by this display of power. And a nuclear device would have to be detonated on the surface rather than in a lunar crater to be visible to the naked eye from Earth. Fearing public backlash from the implications of militarizing space, the United States Air Force thankfully abandoned Project A119, and the nation focused on a much more popular lunar landing. In the 1960s and 1970s, the Apollo rockets carried mortars and explosives to the moon. Most people don't know this. Apollo 16 and 17 crew members detonated them in seismic experiments to figure out what's inside the moon. Is it hollow, as many ufologists claim? That's a story for a different day. So I am intrigued by the notion that the United States military, in its infinite wisdom and at taxpayer expense, talked about and then never did explode nukes on the moon. So when we talk about nuking the moon, actually, I don't think that has happened yet. But we are interested in the seismology of the moon because we're interested in the seismology of everything. Even though after collecting all kinds of seismic data on Earth, nobody can predict volcanoes and earthquakes. It's always a stunner. Okay, so to what end are we collecting all this information? For the sake of having information? I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, the first thing I want to say is, didn't they learn after nuking Hiroshima and Nagasaki and everything else what happens after you nuke things? You know, if you look at alien encounters, UFO encounters, cryptid encounters, if you look at all the craziness that has happened, a large chunk of it has happened after the bomb was detonated, like the America woke something up or caused a dimensional rift. The reason I think they do these things is twofold. One, it's to ascertain what minerals or what new fuels they can use, because mercury's always been a fuel factor in a lot of ancient astronaut theories. Mercury was like the big thing. World War II, Hitler and his cronies. Actually,
now, are you talking about the planet Mercury or the element?
The substance.
Okay.
The element, sorry. And it's always been, you know, for use in fuelings. If you read a lot into the occultic side of World War II and things like that, I think they do it sometimes just to do it. Human beings do things just to do them. Look at kids. You know,
by human beings, you mean men with an unlimited expense account.
Yeah, that's not fair. But if you look at kids, sometimes they'll do a funny dance or they'll do something cute, and you'll go, "What are you doing? Why are you doing that?" I don't know.
I
just wanna do it.
apologize. That I love men. I
No,
love
you're
men, but
fine.
I have an older brother, and I
Fine.
know what happens when you give an
Oh.
older brother a magnifying glass. There are ants on the sidewalk. Okay,
Um,
Ginger, Ginger, unmute yourself and
Well,
help us. Help us.
Yeah, I like what both of you are bringing up about this topic here. My question really for both of you would be, why do you think, I mean, some of this happened as recently as 2009
Yep.
and we don't even know about it. How is this buried? How is it that we don't, hear about this?
It's
because
buried in plain sight. When you go to the NASA website, it's all over the place.
because human beings, for the most part, like the populace, they're okay with their reality TV. They don't care about the moon. I mean, I'm not saying that all people don't. I care
Right.
about the moon and all, things like that. But I think because most people are just, they don't look up. All they do is they work their 9 to 5s and they go home and they watch sports or they watch whatever, and that's fine. Live in a free society, I'm fine with that. But somebody's not going to blink an eye and say, "Oh yeah, they slammed a ship into the moon." I mean, most people are like, "Oh, okay."
It
And most
doesn't
people-
affect their daily life.
Right. And I think most people would consider it a waste of money, because every time I bring that up, like, I think we should go out to space more. I think we need to start thinking about colonizing other planets. We need to start spreading out more. The first thing I'm hit with is, yeah, we don't have that kind of money. And I'm like, but we got money to do all these other stupid things, but yet we don't have money to sort of see what is out there. And
I talk about the ethics of going into space when we can't manage our own planet. Why should we inflict ourselves on the rest of the universe?
I
What
think
right
that
do we have when we can't control our own urges?
The ethics is kind of what you were pointing out, isn't it? That we could permanently damage the moon. Isn't that what you were kind of pointing out?
Well, the insinuation is that nobody lives on the moon. Okay. And therefore we can nuke it with impunity because who cares? Well, a lot of people believe there are inhabitants of the moon. All right. And that they would take serious objection to nuking their world or any world where they exist, and that they show up on Earth to stop. Well, to show that nukes are not the solution to everything. In fact, often they're a bad idea, and that alien intelligences can shut down our nuclear armaments. And the whole Cold War fizzled. Why did the Cold War fizzle? Is it because humans finally understood we can't destroy ourselves with nuclear armaments? The aliens won't allow it. Okay, so that's one little teaser I'll leave with you. But as getting back to the moon, there are stories from credible witnesses that, including the astronauts themselves, that beings met them on the Apollo 11 historic moon landing, the giant step, small step, giant step landing, and intimidated the astronauts, said, collect your dirt and go, and don't come back. Well, something has just changed, because now in the last couple of years, Asian countries, Japan and China, are going to the far side of the moon and taking their remote rovers and doing mineral sampling and looking at sites to have human occupation there. Trump just announced the go-ahead for U.S. companies to mine the moon and asteroids. So here's what it's about. Here's why they do mineral assays testing. They want to know what these objects are composed of. And the Japanese are way ahead with landing robotic craft on asteroids. Asteroids hurtling along, they're spinning at extremely high velocities. And the Japanese have got craft that track, they land on the asteroid. Then they release little hopping robots that hop around and collect mineral samples. They get back into the pod and they fly back to Earth to let the researchers on Earth know what's on this asteroid. Is it worth mining? Because now they're doing cost-benefit analysis. Is there enough good stuff on this asteroid, on this plot of the moon, to warrant exploiting it? And that's the term they use, exploit it. Let's exploit it for its resources. Let's just we've mined the heck out of Earth. Let's go mine the heck out of the moon. Let's go mine the heck out of Mars, out of these asteroids. Well, asteroids, I don't really care that much, but the moon, I object, Your Honor.
Well, and to both of your points too, it seems like if we're going to get further in space as a nation, United States wise, it's going to be private.
Yeah.
It'll be Bigelow or Tesla or whoever.
Right. And the thing is, if we want to do that, because I'm a big proponent of going into space, of colonizing other planets. I always have been, ever since a child. I've been into science fiction books, and I just really think that, I mean, yes, there is that, to play Gene's devil's advocate. There is,
which I can handle because I dish it out. I can take it in.
Right, of course.
You have the right to your opinion.
Of course. We could definitely well be going out there for selfish reasons, but I think that for the most part, once we get out there and once we start establishing, because what will have to happen is we'll have to go out and we'll have to establish bases, and then from bases we can leap out, and then from those leap out points we can leap out further into the universe. I'm a stargazer. I love the planets. You know, I love things like Europa and Titan and all the awesome aspects of planets, and you know, Mars having a civilization on it before humans did, and maybe humans came from Mars due to us destroying our previous planet, which is a very, very possible thing if you look at some of the pockmarks on Mars that don't look like asteroids hit it.
The Atlanteans came from Mars, right? Atlantis people came. The Atlanteans are credited. There's so many theories.
I couldn't tell you who came from Mars, but
Robert, would you sign up to go to Mars?
If this was, is it a one-way trip?
Because think it's gonna be.
I can't be selfish. I don't want to leave my son behind. Now, if I was 19, 20, yes, I would go. I would put me on the first flight smoking out.
Doesn't it take 3 years to get there?
Yeah, but I think with us.
What about secret space program? What about guys saying we got teleport, basically? You could be there.
It's possible. You'd have to have faster than light travel at some point if you really want to get out there.
Folding space.
Or you have to have a way to put humans in a cryo sleep where they can sleep and then they don't age.
This isn't that. This is people saying you get on a ship and a half hour later you're on the moon. You go onto a jump chair and it jumps you to Mars, and you walk through a basically. Stargate? No, you walk through a. What's the name for it? But basically double doors where pressure is adjusted in between. So you come out of a human environment and go into a Martian environment, which is similar but different.
Right.
And it gets deep fast.
Right. I think, at the basic point, we would have to have some sort of faster than light travel to go. I mean, that doesn't discount the double door idea or anything like that. But if we look at it from the most basic point, I think fast and light travel would have to be.
Somebody raised the point, wouldn't we go on UFOs?
Maybe we have. Maybe the UFOs aren't so much a build of an alien race. Maybe they're a build of ours. Or maybe we reverse engineer.
Maybe we are them. Some people say the aliens are us in the future.
Time travel.
Now my brain's broken. Especially when you start getting into the mathematics of it.
These rabbit holes get so complex and intertwisted. And that's why I love the topic.
Yeah,
my objective is not to swing my ego around and say, I'm right, you're wrong. My objective is not to trash talk people who are walking the walk and talking the talk. We can agree to disagree as far as I'm concerned, and we can be impassioned about our disagreement.
Of course.
Don't get me wrong. But what I love is reasonable discourse.
Mm-hmm.
And by reasonable, that doesn't mean that it's not fantastic. And by fantastic, I mean out there, way out there, stretching the limits of belief. And that's what I love about you guys and the topic you're bringing.
Thank you.
Ginger, go ahead.
Real quick, I just wanted to say, I don't want it to get lost that as you were reading your article, I feel like one of the things you were trying to bring up is being a good citizen of the universe, not trashing other planets, not throwing junk out into space. That if we are going to make these forays into space, how unfortunate for us to be. And when you bring up the original program that Carl Sagan kind of exposed, I guess, in the 1950s to bomb the moon and try out nukes on the moon, it makes you think of like the 1950s when people still littered and smoked and, and we don't want to be that kind of citizen as a universal citizen.
Well, apparently some of the aliens believe we're too immature, in as much as our nations still fight each other. We have no business going into space as political agents. Maybe we can go as miners people mining minerals, but we are not ready, apparently, to take our place on any intergalactic council. Right?
And here's why. We want to put nuclear waste out there.
We want to explode nukes on the moon.
But because I can't trash my human race. I'm human myself. We always find a way. That's the one thing about humanity. We always find a way. If you won't let us in, we'll make it happen regardless. And that's a testament, I think. Sometimes it's not the best thing for us hard-headed human beings, but at the end of the day, we persevere, and we've done a lot of good things. And I see a lot of people say, well, you know, with what's going on today, oh, this would get rid of this person or that person. But I think the best thing about humanity is how well we can adapt and overcome. Yeah, there's bad ones, of course, but I think there's more good ones in our.
I totally agree with you, Robert. Just in the final cap I want to put on my article that I brought about the moon is that when the seismic results came in, and I ended the article with, this is a story for another day, but I will let some of the cat out of the bag. Much to the scientists' astonishment, the seismic readings were not what they expected. They were expecting stuff like you'd find on Earth, basically. Right. They were expecting some density, some earthen density and mineral density, but what they found was hollowness. And the moon rang like a bell. That's one quote that you encounter in the research. It rang like a bell. They surely weren't expecting that.
No.
So that, you know, once you get down these rabbit holes, it's just so interesting. And you meet all kinds of people. You mentioned Richard Hoagland. Now, he'd be an excellent panelist on Taboo Topics.
I'd love to talk to him.
So maybe we can get that happening. David Paulides. Would love to have him on the show. You know, I mean, let's work. Let's mastermind in that direction.
Richard's like,
let people speak for themselves, you know, and bring their work right to the round table.
I got questions for Richard. Many. I have like a laundry list of questions that I want answers to. And he's getting older, so I'm hoping at some point I can meet him and talk to him.
Let's get our spirits behind this and work our magic and make it so.
Let's do it.
That's my attitude. And this is the point in the show where I say that I certainly couldn't have done this on my own. Well, I could, but I wouldn't have had all the great inspiration and ideas that you two brought. I want to thank heartily and from the bottom of my soul, Ginger Routh and Robert Solomon for joining me here. And it's time to shout out on Taboo Topics with Jean Broida, which airs every Sunday, 7 to 9 p.m. on my YouTube channel. Please subscribe and like and do all the good stuff. Taboo Topics with Jean Broida, Broida. And it's also simulcast on globalenlightenmentradionetwork.com. So, in alphabetical order, Ginger Routh, how can people contact you and brag on yourself a little bit? How about a little shameless self-promotion?
Yeah, I don't do a whole lot, but you can follow me on Facebook, Ginger Routh on Facebook. I don't have a website. I can give you our Coasties website at some point to put up, Jean, for our local meetings here in St. Louis. And that's it.
Yeah, well, what is that website?
It's really complicated.
Uh-oh.
Because it's not just
but people could do an online search, couldn't they?
Yeah, it's called St. Louis Coasties.
Coasties.
Yeah.
Coasties.
Yeah, but it's not just a .com. It's not just a .com. It's a free website, so it's got a weird URL.
But people could search and find it.
Yes.
And these are in the flesh meetings.
Right.
With awesome presentations, I might add.
Yes, every month. And when we can resume.
Yes. And so people can get a hold of you on Facebook, it sounds like.
Right.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. How do you spend your time? You know, and we know that you're an events coordinator and a paranormal civic leader, but and I don't want to pry, but you know so much about the paranormal. Tell us about. I'm curious to know a little bit about how you research, what you research, why you research.
I listen to Coast, obviously. That's how I got my start in all this. And once I find a topic that I'm really into, I just go down that rabbit hole. I'm active on Reddit. I'm involved in a bunch of true crime groups and just, my own research online pretty much.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So, Robert Solomon, shout yourself out, my friend.
So you can find me on Facebook. You can find me actually multiple places on Facebook. The first place you can find me is, of course, This Uncanny Earth. That is the official Facebook group. Please go join. You'll catch all the updates there. We also have This Uncanny Media Network, which is a Facebook page. Feel free to like that. I also have a voice actor page because I do voice acting on a couple different podcasts, and that's just Robert Solomon. You can find him like that. You can find me on Instagram at This Uncanny Media Network. I have a Twitter handle, but I don't really go on Twitter because everybody likes to fight on Twitter, and I'm good on that. You can also find our show, This Uncanny Earth, at www.spreaker.com/This Uncanny Earth. You can get all the episodes. We're up to episode 93. This week, we'll be talking with Bigfoot specialist Bill Lancaster, who has 3 Bigfoot documentaries on Amazon Prime. So we're going to talk to him. 2 weeks ago, we talked about the missing 411, as I talked to Ginger a little bit earlier, which was it's kind of a weird coincidence that you had her on to talk about that, because it was fresh in my mind. I even had the research notes pulled up too as we were talking, just so I could glance at it. It's crazy. So that's where you can find me.
I love your show.
Thank you.
I love all the uncanny-ites. I know there's some uncanny-ites listening right now.
That's what I call them. Yep,
you made me a believer in what you do. And I love both of you. You're my soul brother, my soul sister. It's no accident that we connected. It's no accident people are listening to this show. And certainly I invite all of you to check out my book, Unknown Objects, the Top 10 U.S. UFO Cases. It's 10 stories in chronological order that trace not only riveting cases of UFO encounters in United States history, but how the public was informed of those cases through media. And I look at how credible are the witnesses. That's always of interest to me. Who is reporting this, and are they credible or not? So I included very credible cases. And I also included cases that, as you follow along historically, we see how the United States government adapted to public reaction to UFOs and the phenomenon that's so hush-hush, so taboo, and refined this cover-up of you must be crazy to believe in UFOs, to the point where newscasters are sniggering every time there's the occasional UFO report, until in more recent history, in this millennium, we now see reports where police officers in uniform are being taken credibly by the news reporters, who the one introducing the article will snigger a little, but the one on site, the one on the ground, is not sniggering. They're trying to take it a little more seriously. You got to give them the benefit of the doubt. They're between a rock and a hard place. But my book will explain to you why we are where we are, in terms of how is it that now UFO truth has become a matter of belief. It's not belief. My government knows UFOs exist. And once you've read my book, you'll know why you must be crazy not to believe in UFOs. As I said before, I write as Lightworker 111 for thedailyconspiracy.com and a few other websites as well. Check me out there. We get in some politics, and I know that irritates some of you. What can I say? That's the nature of nature that we know. I also have my website for the show, tabootopics.life/shows. It's a work in progress. And I have my personal website, which has been debugged, and now you actually can see content there. Yay. That is www.lightwork111.com. And finally, I invite any and all of you to email me directly, Jean, Jean, at lightwork111.com. I want to hear from you. And if you'd like to be a guest panelist on the show, I invite you to let me know, because I am interested in promoting some of the softer voices. We had talked about some big name ufologists, big name paranormalists. Here's a forum for lesser name paranormalists, perhaps on their way up and up, perhaps not. We do this because we have a common interest. And as Robert had said, we're not here to keep all this information to ourselves and charge admission for it. No, we want the opposite. We want everybody to know, everybody to debate, everybody to be talking about taboo topics. So last thoughts, Robert? Oh, you're muted, my friend.
That's okay. There we go.
There we go.
I just want to thank you and Ginger for a fantastic conversation. I love conversations like this with people. It teaches me new things. It guides me on a path I know I'm set on, and I'm really enjoying it. And I'm just thankful. I woke up alive today, and this was a great show, and I'm just thankful. That's it. I'm just thankful.
Well, you helped make this a great show. Let's keep that in our thoughts, Robert. Thank you so much for being present and mindful and bringing some great content to the show. Ginger.
Yeah, thank you, Jean, for having me. It was a pleasure as always, and it was great to meet you, Robert. I'd love to hear what you have to say. And to the audience out there, keep researching. If you're curious about something, dig in, ask questions, find other like-minded individuals to explore these topics. They're out there. And, curious people are the ones who discover things.
I so agree with all that. Don't take our word for it. Go do your own research. And we know you may have limited time, but just as Ginger said, pick one topic of interest. Check it out. I guarantee you that will make you interested in some other topic. I'd be astonished if it didn't. So thank you for tuning into Taboo Topics with Jean Broida. The April 26th, 2020 episode rocked out with my guest panelists, Ginger Routh and Robert Solomon. They've been back from previous appearances, and I hope they'll be back again. But for now, that's our take on it. Thank you, everyone around the world, for listening in to Taboo Topics with Jean Broida on my Taboo Topics YouTube channel at tabootopics.life/shows and at globalenlightenmentradiionetwork.com. See you next week. Over and out.
But one day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment.